As the word is read and proclaimed, teach us what we need to know. Inspire us. Breathe in and through us. Lead us with your fiery presence so that we may follow you without fear. Amen. Our first reading this morning comes from the book of Joel, chapter 2, verses 23 through 32, and Psalm chapter 65, verses 1 through 13. We will be using the New Revised Standard Version for our readings today. O children of Zion, be glad and rejoice in the Lord our God, for he has given the early rain for your vindication. He has poured down for you abundant rain, the early and the later rain as before. The threshing floors shall be full of grain, the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. I will repay you for the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter, my great army which I sent against you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of your Lord, your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never again be put to shame. You shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, that I, the Lord, am your God, and there is no other. And my people shall never again be put to shame. Then afterward I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Even on the male and female slaves, in those days I will pour out my spirit. I will show portents in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as the Lord has said, and among the survivors shall be those whom the Lord calls. And from Psalm 65, verses 1 through 13, praise is due to you, O God, in Zion, and to you shall vows be performed, O you who answer prayer. To you all flesh shall come. When deeds of iniquity overwhelm us, you forgive our transgressions. Happy are those whom you choose and bring near to live in your courts. We shall be satisfied with the goodness of your house, your holy temple. By awesome deeds you answer us with deliverance, O God of our salvation. You are the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas. By your strength you establish the mountains. You are girded with might. You silence the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves, the tumult of the peoples. Those who live at earth's farthest bounds are awed by your signs. You make the gateways of the morning and the evening shout for joy. You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grain, for so you have prepared it. Water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening it with showers, and blessing its growth. You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with richness. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy.
Our second reading this morning comes from 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 through 8 and 16 through 18. As for me, I am already being poured out as a libation, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. From now on there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. At my first offense no one came to my support, but all deserted me. May it not be counted against them. But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and save me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. And our gospel reading comes from Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus, God, I thank you that I am not like the other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Today's gospel sure seems to contrast with what we see and hear every day. In America right now, humility seems to be in short supply. Ours seems to be a culture full of self-promoters, tweets and retweets, professional YouTubers, people who are branding themselves obsessively. We've got the exalted part down pat, but caring about others, putting their needs before our own, whether it's people halfway across the world or those in our own community, is now somehow seen as weakness. Silly, really. Much better to look out for you and yours and let everyone else take care of themselves. That's just being smart, right? We can't help those who don't want it. So like the Pharisee in today's gospel reading, we thank God that we have what we have, and we're lucky enough not to be in Venezuela or Syria or on the wrong side of St. Louis or San Francisco right now. A lack of humility even extends to our everyday behavior online as well. Research shows that Americans are more likely to like a Facebook or Instagram post if their friends have liked it. In fact, our criteria of whether a photo is good or not depends on how many people have liked it. We pay attention to the shares, the comments, the follows. Just think how often something pops into our everyday conversation simply because it's trending. It's not important, it's just popular, and we really don't seem to care about the difference anymore. Silicon Valley executives could decide right now, if they wanted, to simply erase all of that, to let likes and shares be private or hidden. They could, but the vanity in all of us, the insecurity, well, that seems to be half the reason most of us are on social media in the first place, right? Facebook sold itself as a new digital community. With all we know now about cyberbullying, the easy spread of misinformation, and the increased nature of online spaces as echo chambers, think how naive that sounds today. Who on earth opens up Instagram today to become more humble? So when I read today's gospel, the lectionary reading for today, I was reminded of how challenging it is to be humble. Being humble, or at least trying to be, strips us down. It leaves us exposed and vulnerable. It doesn't have much currency in today's world. Attempting to be humble invites you to swim upstream. That's not really fun. But social scientists define humility in 2 parts. First, an ability to accurately acknowledge one's limitations and abilities, and 2, a stance that is other-oriented rather than self-focused. Clear connections to the gospel stand out. First, focusing on others. You're not humble if you don't care about anybody else. You're not humble if you think it's for suckers. You're not humble if you make sure your needs are taken care of first. You're not humble if you think that those who disagree with you aren't just wrong, but bad people. But the overall message of stepping outside ourselves, of wearing someone else's shoes, while radical, that to me seems easy enough to grasp. Hard to live, sure, but I get the point. The first part of humility, however, to accurately acknowledge one's limitations and abilities has been challenging me a lot this past week. Here's part of why. While serving in the Peace Corps, I had the opportunity to meet some brilliant people who, had they lived in a different country, would surely be quite successful today. They would have been able to attend college to find a challenging job, to be the next scientists, engineers, and authors that would change the way we understand the world. That didn't happen. Some of those people now continue to struggle in El Salvador. Some have migrated to other countries and work menial jobs in the shadows. But this isn't something that just happens with other countries. I saw this while teaching in Kansas City as well. I taught some incredibly bright young people, but because of the impossible costs of attending school, immigration statuses, or other issues, these students didn't get a chance. Think about the chasms between the rich and poor in our country, the divides that are only growing, those who are forgotten and hungry, those who live in conflict zones, those 39 poor souls who were discovered in a semi this week in England. A news alert flashed on my phone last week. On October 17, 1933, Albert Einstein fled Europe and arrived on the shores of New York, a Jewish refugee who arrived with his name on German list of assassination targets. And then I hear the sound bites. And it sounds a lot like our Pharisee. We don't have room in our country. If only they stayed and fixed our own. Thank God I'm not there. And then I read today's gospel. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of my income. And I wonder how much we're like the Pharisee. How much credit do we really deserve for what we have? And how many millions across this globe work just as hard as we, but don't have the same opportunities? And how humbling would it be for us to see ourselves if we took the privileges away? How much of our self-image is constructed upon accomplishments that aren't ours? What would we see in the mirror? How tall would we measure, and who would we be if we didn't have the shoulders of America's wealth and power to stand on? And I wonder, and I worry that too often, like the Pharisee, our 10% tithes aren't enough. We like helping, but being placed on the same level as those who don't look, pray, or talk like us, that's uncomfortable. And what good does humility even do in today's world? So far, all it sounds like is one big guilt trip. Make me feel bad about my warm house and my new car, and then what? Where do we go from here? I can't donate everything. I can't give it all away. Let's be practical here, Jesus, right? What are you really asking of me? There, but for the grace of God go I. God, be merciful to me, a sinner, said the tax collector. And this last line, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. Maybe humility can actually be good. It can be happy. Maybe there can be some joy in this. Maybe we can use humility to engage with the world in a new way, one where we truly fight for equality and find happiness in the search for a better world. I truly believe that recognizing that we can't do this alone, this weight isn't ours alone to bear. We are part of Christ's body and can depend on Christ and on others for our light and strength, that humility can be inspiring. It's not about guilt. As iron sharpens iron, the book of Proverbs says, so one person sharpens another. We're not in this alone. We all have something to give, and perhaps more importantly, something to learn. Our collective wisdom is much more than our individual understanding of the world. Enough with the stereotype that each man is an island. While researching, I found some interesting facts about humility. Based on social science research, those who score high on humility tests, not that they boast about it, but they also scored lower on measures of political and ideological polarization, whether conservative or liberal. And people who score high for humility are less aggressive and less judgmental towards members of other religious groups than are less humble people, especially after being challenged about their own religious views. Humility seems to make you stronger. And humility, and this what stood out to me, was not related to IQ measures or political affiliation. Instead, it was linked strongly to curiosity, reflection, and open-mindedness. No, we won't get this right all the time. Yes, today's gospel presents us with a near impossible challenge. But the search for humility, for looking outside ourselves and seeing solutions and working together, surely this is a path to a more peaceful and joyful world. We're in this together. Christ calls us to strengthen the ties that bind us together, to further weave the human tapestry to include even more colors. Let's seek to do this in real ways. Enough likes and retweets, enough praise of those who divide, enough of identifying ourselves based on what we have, not who we are. Jesus isn't gentle in this parable. It's a clear and urgent message. Stay humble now. The best part about it is that living with humility, joining hands to build a better world, can probably be a lot more fun. Here's to trying.